Okay.
Chairman Kinski, YouTube is live.
Okay, good. Welcome to Senate Appropriations Committee meeting Thursday, January 26, 2023, 8 a.m. And Linda, please call the roll.
Senator Anderson.
Here.
Senator Garou.
Excused.
Senator Nethercott. Here. Senator Salzar.
Here.
And Chairman Kinski.
Here. We have three matters for consideration. Senate 145, State Budgeting and Reserves. Senate File 158, which is a continuation of Public Employee Retirement Plan contributions. And Senate File 146, State Funded Capital Construction. First up is 145, State Budgeting and Reserves. And we are blessed to have Brian Fuller, the author of this bill, with us. I noticed that Don Richards is here as well. Director. Oh, what did I say? Okay. Now, you got me as off kilter as Eli used to. Let's see, where was I? So just a thumbnail of this bill. This is the 5X bill combined with simplification of the chart of accounts. And we've got a diagram here that explains it all, trying to simplify some of the flows, trying to simplify some of the coffee cans, which is what makes the bill so voluminous. This was leadership, President Driscoll, Vice President Hicks, or Majority Floor Leader Hicks, want to move this along. I have great reservations, as you know, about 5X, but I think it's the classic. If you're going to do it, make sure the bill's done right. So I'll turn it over to Brian. Thanks, Brian, and welcome.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senate File 145, State Budgeting and Reserves. This bill essentially contains elements, Mr. Chairman, as you just described, of three bills. So House Bill 89, which is the state investment returns, adequate reserve funding. Senate File 85, which is streamlining transfers and distributions. And then Senate File 66, school capital construction funding. And so this bill draft, in a nutshell, it repeals several accounts. It repeals the budget reserve account, the Strategic Investments and Projects account, SIPA, the Wyoming State Penitentiary Capital Construction account within SIPA, the School Major Maintenance Sub-account within SIPA, and all funds that are remaining in these accounts would be transferred to the general fund. Then the bill also repeals the School Capital Construction account and the Major Maintenance account, and all funds remaining in those accounts are transferred to the School Foundation Program account. The bill also amends statutes for the reserve accounts for the permanent funds to increase the threshold at which funds in those reserve accounts tip or revert into the appropriate permanent funds corpus. So that's I think, Mr. Chairman, you refer to the 5 times. That's that concept. It also specifies that with a couple of narrow exceptions, those reserve accounts are intended to be inviolate perpetual funds. Then, Mr. Chairman, the bill transfers funds from the LSRA to each of the 4 reserve accounts for the investment purposes. And then the bill finally repeals several statutory guarantees. So, for example, the $100 million guarantee from the LSRA to the School Foundation Program account. And I'll address all of this as we walk through the bill. So beginning on page 3, line 16, this is 91417A, which concerns utilizing the LSRA for interfund loans. This simply strikes a reference to the budget reserve account. This happens a number of places in this bill where it's just simply striking that account, or if necessary, inserting a reference to another appropriate account.
So essentially it's conforming.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Same with page 4. This concerns audit requirements, and this strikes a reference to on line 9, 9.2.10.14.1, which is repealed in this draft. And this paragraph talks about withholding any appropriation under that section for failing to complete a required audit. And so it takes the reference from that section and just says that the state treasurer shall withhold the annual distribution to a city or town by any legislative appropriation for failing to complete that audit. And then page 4, line 12, that withholding has been retained in the budget reserve account. This would have that be retained in the general fund. Then moving on to page 6, lines 17 and 18, this statute concerns the Department of Health withholding certain funds to require mental health providers to adopt certain performance measures. All this is doing is striking the budget reserve account and inserting the general fund in terms of where that withholding reverts. Page 7, line 11. This is 9.2.10.12E, and this concerns budget preparation. This strikes language concerning the governor's budget recommendations to have 5% of the general fund receipts be appropriated to the budget reserve account. Instead, what the new language would provide on page 8 is that the recommendation is for a reserve amount to be retained in the general fund.
Okay.
Then, Mr. Chairman, moving on to page 10, lines 1 through 5. This is 9.2.10.13D2, which concerns recommended appropriations for budget purposes. This strikes language concerning that 5% amount for the budget reserve account, and instead references the general fund reserve amount, which is the new language that's on page 8.
Okay.
Then page 10, line 17 to 18, simply strikes a reference for transfers from the budget reserve account. Page 10, line 21, and then lines 1 through 11 on page 11. This concerns a definition for appropriations, and it simply restructures that appropriation and strikes a reference of a transfer of funds from the budget reserve account. Then page 11, lines 16 to 18, this inserts language to state that nothing in this subsection prevents the governor from including recommendations for additional funding for state agencies and for local governments from severance taxes or from federal mineral royalties. The inclusion of this language is taken from 9.2.10.14.1, which is repealed in this draft. 9-2-1014.1. Page 12, lines 1 and 2 is just a conforming amendment to correct statutory references. Then the next change is kind of shifting gears a little bit more toward the consolidation of the school funding accounts. So page 12, lines 14 to 15, in 94305B, this would provide that 1/3 of the mineral royalties would be deposited in the school foundation program account instead of the school lands mineral royalties account, which is repealed in this draft. Then moving on to page 14, lines 14 to 18, in 94601A2, first a conforming amendment on line 14, and then it changes the percentage of a certain distribution of remaining royalties that's distributed to the school foundation program account, and it increases that percentage from 44.8 to 47.5. And this is, while it looks like an increase, is actually a conforming amendment. There's a provision, a different section that's repealed in this draft that had 2.7% be deposited to the school capital construction account, which is repealed. So all this is doing is taking that distribution and moving it to this paragraph.
Okay.
Then page 15, lines 8 through 14, this is 94601B1 concerning bonus payments. It would just have a certain percentage and a certain amount of excess deposited in the school foundation program account instead of the school capital construction account. Page 16, lines 3 through 8, similarly, this would have a certain excess of those payments go into the school foundation program account instead of the school capital construction account. That's the same for lines 10 through 15 on page 16. Then the change on page 16, lines 17 through 18, is a conforming amendment to address statutory references. Shifting gears again, back more toward the general budgeting process. So page 17, lines 2 through 3, in 94601D4, this strikes a reference to the budget reserve account and inserts the general fund in terms of where certain revenues from the royalties would be deposited. Page 17, lines 7 through 8, and then again 15 to 17 are conforming amendments to correct statutory references, and then to strike a reference to the budget reserve account and insert the general fund.
That was page 18?
Mr. Chairman, that's page 17.
Okay.
So moving on to page 18, line 1 is another distribution from striking the budget reserve account and inserting the general fund. And then page 18, line 15, this is a bit of a shift again. This is in reference to the transfers to the from the LSRA to the reserve accounts. And so page 18, line 15, this is a new subsection O, and this would require that all amounts that would otherwise be distributed to the school foundation program account on and after July 1, 2024, would be deposited first in the legislative stabilization reserve account. So in essence, what this is doing is this is repaying that LSRA distribution to the common school reserve account.
Which is outstanding. That's a timing loan, isn't it?
Mr. Chairman, I suppose it is a timing. Part of it is timing. Part of it is an intent to repay the LSRA for that transfer later on in the bill from the LSRA to the common school reserve account.
Okay.
Then page 19, this is 94719B. This is the PMTF reserve account. And so beginning with lines 12 through line 20, this strikes existing language that guarantees from the PMTF reserve account to the general fund, an amount that's equal to 2.5% of the previous, of the 5-year average market value of the fund. So that's getting rid of a guarantee that the reserve account would have to the general fund. Then on page 19, line 20, the new language inserted going on to page 20, line 4, provides that except for funds that are specified by the legislature to guarantee any obligations of the PMTF investment earnings, and any funds that are to be transferred from the reserve account to the PMTF corpus, so the TIPS, except for those two instances, the reserve account is intended to be inviolate and is intended to be a permanent or perpetual trust fund.
Please, Senator Drew.
Could you go back and repeat what you just said? Just that last part about the funds and inviolate, and not just that last part.
Yep.
Make sure I got it.
Yep.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Grew, this is the language on page 19 at the end of line 20, and then going through page 20, line 4, the new language that's inserted in this subsection. And this language is identical to what is in House Bill 89. What this says is, except for funds that are specified by the legislature to guarantee the obligations of the PMTF investment earnings, and for funds that would be transferred from the reserve account to the corpus, so the TIP that would occur under this subsection, the PMTF reserve account is intended to be inviolate and to constitute a permanent and perpetual trust fund.
So Brian, what guarantees would remain when we're done with this?
From the reserve account,
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think any.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So then, Mr. Chairman, the changes on page 20, lines 6 and 7 are just conforming amendments and technical changes to address a repeal of guarantees. And then page 20, lines 8 and 9, this is changing the percentage amount at which funds from the reserve account would tip into the PMTF corpus. And that change from 150% to 245% would be a percentage that would enable 7 times the annual spend to be held in the reserve account before it reverts to the corpus. And keep in mind, Mr. Chairman, this is, and for the new members, this was a decision made in House Bill 89 by the Select Committee on Capital Financing and Investments, that the percentage tip would be set at 7 times the annual spend. The appropriations or the transfers in the bill from the LSRA were based on a 5 times value.
Okay.
Then, Mr. Chairman, page 20, beginning on line 19, this is new language. This subsection deals with the common school reserve account. And this is virtually identical to the language in the PMTF reserve account, but it says that except for funds specified that guarantee any obligations of the investment earnings from the common school account and the tips from the reserve account to the common school account corpus, that common school reserve account is intended to be inviolate and constitute a permanent or perpetual trust fund. Then page 21, lines 13 and 14, this increases the percentage at which funds would be transferred from the reserve account to the common school account corpus. That percentage is increased from 150% to 420%. Then page 21.
That's 7X.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Page 21, line 21, this is the same principle for the Excellence in Higher Education Endowment Reserve account. So it's intended to be inviolate in a permanent perpetual fund, except for the tips to the corpus and guarantees from those investment earnings. Then page 22, lines 7 and 8, that would change the percentage, the tip percentage from 150% to 210%.
7X.
Correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Page 22, line 18 is a conforming amendment. Page 23, lines 3 through 5, this strikes a reference to SIPA for earnings that are in excess of 2.5% of the spending policy amount. With this change, all of those earnings would go to the LSRA instead of being split equally to SIPA and the LSRA. Page 24, lines 1 through 12. This section concerns loans to cities and towns under the Joint Powers Act. And this provision concerns a loss reserve account. And the language that is stricken would strike a required quarterly transfer from the PMTF reserve account to this loss reserve account when necessary to ensure a balance equal to 5% of outstanding loans are maintained in the loss reserve account. So this is, Mr. Chairman, really getting rid of another guarantee of the PMTF reserve account.
Okay.
Page 24, line 21, and then page 25, lines 3, 4, and 5. These are conforming amendments regarding the school foundation program account. And that would be the same on page 25, lines 15 and 16. Then page 26, lines 2 and 3, and then 10 and 11. This strikes references to the school lands mineral royalties account and replaces those reference to the school foundation program account. That's the same for page 26, lines 21 to 22. These provisions on this page concerns distribution of certain revenues and bonds that may be created. Page 27, lines 15 to 16. This is striking a reference to the school capital construction account and inserts a reference to the school foundation program account. This is a section concerning the distribution of payments for repair and replacement payments to schools. Page 28, lines 21 and 22. This is a section concerning school capital construction expenditures and just strikes a reference to the school capital construction account and replaces it with the school foundation program account, and it would say expenditures from the SFP for school capital construction. Page 30, lines 11 and 12, and then 16 to 17. These are again changing references from the school CapCon account to the SFP. Same for page 31, lines 5 and 6. Page 31, line 21 is just correcting a statutory reference. And then page 32, beginning with line 11, this is the subsection that creates the Hathaway reserve account. And so this is the language that specifies that except for funds to guarantee scholarship obligations of the Hathaway program and funds that are transferred from the reserve account to the Hathaway corpus, that reserve account is intended to be inviolate and intended to be a permanent or perpetual fund.
Okay, so the exceptions are guarantees
For scholarships
and tips.
and tips, correct, Mr. Chairman.
And so we're going to enable the legislature to continue to intercept tips, is what the language says. It's inviolate except when you grab the money that's going to tip in.
No, Mr. Chairman, that would be the tip from the reserve account to the Hathaway corpus.
Yes. The language contemplates that they're going to continue to intercept. Right? You said it's going to tip unless the legislature either uses that money to guarantee or intercepts the tips. Am I misunderstanding the language?
Mr. Chairman, I suppose that would be, well, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure the way it's written, and this would be the same for the other reserve accounts. This says, and I'm looking specifically on page 32, lines 14 and 15, it says funds to be transferred into the Hathaway Student Scholarship Endowment Fund. So I think that language contemplates that it's only a transfer. So the only two scenarios in which it's intended not to be inviolate would be for scholarships or for transfers from the reserve account to the corpus.
I had it backwards. So it's inviolate except for tips and the obligations that the RAs used to fulfill.
That's correct, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
I got you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep. Then, Mr. Chairman, page 33, lines 6 through 9, this amends the amount. The Hathaway set up a little differently in that the tip can occur when the balance is in excess of a specified dollar amount or in excess of a percentage of the market value of the fund. But the changes here from 12 to 47 million and then 4.5% to 8% would reflect a 7 times balance in the reserve account.
Okay.
Then page 34, shifting gears a bit again, this is striking a reference for cease and transfer loans would be deposited in the general fund instead of the budget reserve account. That's the same for page 35, line 21, for the cease and transfer grants. Any interest earned would go to the general fund. And then same for cease and transfer loans. This is page 36, line 8, just replacing that deposit from the budget reserve account to the general fund. Then page 37, lines 1 through...
Senator Guru.
Question. Thank you, Mr. On the language on page 34, line 8, loans may be made under this program at 0 interest rate up to an annual interest rate. Is that language also in the loans for other loans that are in this bill? Or is this the only place that this is written this way?
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Guru, the principal reason that this provision is included is to get rid of the reference to the budget reserve account, which is repealed. Right. I think these loans are made, I'd have to look at the statute to see where they're made from. Okay. But I don't recall them being identified as from a permanent fund as JAC studied this interim.
And I only bring it up because we just passed a bill saying that we changed every loan amount other than every loan amount in the state to float at a market rate. And now we got one in here that's 0, and I just wanted to see if we were missing something. Mr. Chairman,
Senator Guru, all of those loan programs that were amended in that JAC bill were loans, I believe, from the PMTF.
I see.
And I don't believe this program, I mean, this has a separate account from which the loans are made. And so that's why I believe this provision was not identified or included in that JAC bill.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good catch, though, Mike.
Yep. Mr. Chairman, page 37, lines 1 through 3, this is a provision concerning the distribution of severance taxes. First, there is a conforming amendment to strike subsections that are repealed, and then it would provide that the excess distributions would all go to the general fund.
And
Page-
which provision said, oh, I see it. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, this is
All right.
3914-801D.
Okay.
And then page 37, lines 8 and 9, this is concerning the distribution of inheritance taxes. It provides that the distribution would be entirely to the general fund. Currently, it's 10 million to the general fund, and then the rest to the budget reserve account. This would have the entire distribution of inheritance taxes going to the general fund.
Of which we've never collected any in
Yep.
decades, I think.
So, Mr. Chairman, then page 37, line 11, these are the repealed statutes in this bill. And I'll just walk through each section or provision that's being repealed. So first, 9.2.1014.1 concerns budget requests for certain funding from the budget reserve account. Since that account's repealed, that section is extraneous now. 9.4.219B is a provision that requires an amount necessary to restore the unobligated balance of the school foundation program account to 100 million must be transferred from the LSRA to the school foundation program account. So that guarantee from the LSRA is repealed in this draft. 9.4.220 is the section creating SIPA. 9.4.220.1 is the state penitentiary capital construction account. 9.4.224 is the school lands mineral royalties account. 9.4.601A7 repeals a transfer of royalties to the school capital construction account, and that's that 2.7% that was added earlier in the bill. 9.4.601K repeals transfers royalty revenues that were for distribution in fiscal years 2018 through 2020. So that language is now obsolete. 9.4.601M was transfers for fiscal year 21, which is also obsolete. 9.4.715P6 is repealing the inclusion of the state penitentiary capital construction account in Pool A. So that's more of a conforming repeal. 9.4.719B1 was a transfer from the PMTF reserve account to SIPA. And then 9.4.719S, I'll spend a minute on this subsection. This subsection provides that funds that are deposited from the general fund to SIPA and the LSRA may be deposited to a different fund or account as specified by a general appropriations bill if it's necessary to alleviate a budget shortfall or a structural budget deficit. Mr. Chairman, I flag that because the committee may want to consider whether that subsection, so on one hand, it arguably provides a guarantee. The flip side, though, is that this subsection also provides an avenue for the legislature to deal with budget shortfalls or the need to redirect revenue in the budget. So that would be one I would flag for the committee to consider whether it should or should not be repealed, particularly in that it does give an avenue for dealing with shortfalls.
And it's transfer from where to where?
These would be funds that are deposited so earnings that are deposited from the general fund to now it would just be the LSRA may be deposited to a different fund or account as specified in the budget bill. And so that would be one I would flag for consideration, whether that should be, that language, that avenue or option should be retained.
Well, we've never had any trouble moving money around. I don't know that we need it in statute. Okay.
So then moving on, 2115-111A1 repeals the definition of the school capital construction account. 35.1.10.03D concerns the rural hospital endowment challenge account. And this repeals an excess So any amount that's in excess of 1.5 million in that account would be deposited in the budget reserve account. So that's why that provision is repealed. 3914-801 D1 and 2 concern severance tax distributions. An amendment provides that the entire excess distribution goes to the general fund. These two paragraphs split that between the general fund and the budget reserve account. So that's why they're repealed. 3914-801 G and H concern severance tax distributions for fiscal year 2019 and 2021. So that language is obsolete. And then 3919-111 A1 and 2 concern inheritance tax distributions. Under the bill, the amendment, they would all go to the general fund instead of general fund and budget reserve account. Then page 37, line 17, separately repeals 94601N, which provided excess royalty revenues for fiscal year 23 and 24 to be split between the school foundation program account and the budget reserve account. And then similarly for 3914-801K, that provided for excess severance tax distributions for fiscal year 23 and 4 to be split between the SFP, the budget reserve account, and the SFP reserve account. Page 37, line 22 provides that for fiscal years 23 and 24, before transferring funds from SIPA to the State Penitentiary Capital Construction Account, the state auditor would be first required to transfer funds to the school major maintenance sub-account.
This is on 38, section 6?
This is, Mr. Chairman, page 37 and 38, this is section 4.
Okay.
Section 5 just states that the specific accounts are repealed. And then section 6A, this is page 38, line 17. So on July 1, 2024, the beginning of the next budget biennium, all funds within the budget reserve account, SIPA, the State Penn Capital Construction Account, and the school major maintenance sub-account within SIPA are transferred to the general fund. And then any unexpended funds that have been appropriated or obligated from any of those accounts before July 1, 2024 shall be paid from the general fund. And then any reversions that are required to go to the repealed accounts would instead go to the general fund. Page 39, line 8, this is similar except for the school accounts. So all funds on July 1, 24, all funds in the school lands mineral royalties account and the school capital construction account would be transferred to the school foundation program account.
Brian, go back on 38. You said on section 6, SIPA, BRA, and PEN and SMMA go to the general fund. Why wouldn't the school major maintenance account go to this SFP?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that's because it's within SIPA.
I got you. Okay.
And then, so page 39, line 8, so any funds, so at the beginning of the next biennium, July 1, 2024, all funds within the school minerals royalties account and the school capital construction account are transferred to the school foundation program account. And then similarly, any unexpended funds that are appropriated or obligated from those two accounts that are repealed must be paid from the school foundation program account, and any reversions or transfers to those repealed accounts would revert instead to the school foundation program account. Then page 39, beginning on line 22 and then continuing on page 40. These are the transfers to the reserve accounts in amounts necessary to bring them to 5 times the spend in those reserve accounts. So it would be $359.1 million from the LSRA to the Common School Permanent Fund Reserve Account, $274.7 million from the LSRA to the PMTF Reserve Account, $4.6 million from the LSRA to the Hathaway Reserve Account, and $1.2 from the LSRA to the Excellence in Higher Education Endowment Reserve Account.
So Brian, so take 14 on the Hathaway. Earlier you said it's 7X. That's the goal is 7X, but we're putting money in them to get them to 5X.
So Mr. Chairman, the percentage tips have been changed to allow a balance up to 7 times to accumulate. These transfers reflect a 5 times the spending policy amount based on the actual balance of the funds as of June 30th.
Gotcha.
Then page 41, line 4, the amounts transferred in subsection A are required to be securely deposited in those reserve accounts, excuse me, and shall not be invested or otherwise deposited in a manner inconsistent with the way the funds were invested on July 1, 2022 until first, the State Treasurer's Office certifies in writing to SLIB and the Office of State Lands and Investments that investment policy statements have been adopted that provide for the investment of the transferred amounts in accordance with law and as part of a total return strategy. And this is on page 42.
So this is the back office.
Correct. Yep.
Back office has to be there.
Exactly. Yep. And that all accounting and financial reporting systems are available and are operating in a condition that allows fully compliant accounting and reporting on the investment and handling of the funds and the earnings. And then page 42, line 1, provides that SLIB, once receiving the required certification from the Treasurer's Office, would provide written notice to the State Treasurer's Office that the office is authorized to begin investing the funds that are transferred in this bill using those adopted investment policies and using fully compliant financial accounting and reporting practices. Page 42, line 10, requires the state auditor by September 1st of 2024 to report on the amounts transferred to the general fund and the school foundation program account from the accounts that are repealed in this bill. Page 42, line 15, just provides legislative intent that an appropriation from the Hathaway expenditure account for administrative expenses would not be paid from the expenditure account in the next and successive.
And we did that just last year, didn't we?
I think that's correct, Mr. Chairman. That was in last year's budget bill.
Yeah. Okay.
Then page 43, section 10 of the bill are findings that are associated with the transfers to the reserve accounts. And these findings are identical to those adopted by the Select Committee on Capital Financing and Investments in House Bill 89. And then, Mr. Chairman, the effective date. So this bill would be effective with the next fiscal biennium, beginning on July 1, 2024, except that the repeals of those provisions that impact this and next fiscal year, and then the transfer of funds under Section 4 of the bill to the school major maintenance sub-account, those two provisions are effective immediately. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Brian, if you've got all that written out, a copy of it would be good to help Senator Nethercott as she presents this bill on the floor.
I fully expect to support my Senate leadership, who is actually sponsoring the bill.
So I'd like to apologize for the length of the bill, but it indicates how busy the legislature has been over the last decade or so, creating this incredible Rube Goldberg machine. So if you could then walk us through the illustrations of the net effect of this when we're all done, that would be helpful, Brian. Oh, Don, thank you. You had some late nights putting these flow charts together, or somebody did.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and the credit on those flow charts goes to Taylor DuPont. These were not my work. Building upon Brian's comments as he walked through the bill, I wanted to share maybe 5 points with you for practical considerations, just so there are no surprises. On page 8 of the bill, before I move to the flow charts,
Okay.
we call this the statutory reserve amount, which is kind of the 5% cash balance. And you'll recall that appears in the budget reserve account at $115 million. It changes from biennium to biennium. Sometimes it's 104, sometimes it's 109. The issue I wanted to raise here is that 5% is the same, and it's still 5% of the general fund, but all of a sudden we have a lot more money in the general fund because all of these other accounts are going away. So your statutory reserve amount is going to grow by 50, 60, $70 million, depending upon the biennium. So I just wanted to highlight that as a practical implication of that section. The second one appears on page 37, line
So the
13.
reserve grows by 150, it'll be around, be 150, 160 million instead of 110,
Correct, Mr. Chairman.
okay?
I won't belabor this one. I think Mr. Fuller discussed the policy choice on the budget shortfall measures on page 37.
We'll get there.
Page 37, line 13. And
And yeah, and Mr. Chairman, that's the repeal of 94719S.
I just, again, wanted to reiterate the policy choice there.
So walk us through what we do now and why that's important, given all the projections we have. We know when there's a shortage coming well before the shortage hits.
Mr. Chairman, you went for, or the legislature went for decades without this provision. And then as a result of the 2016 memo that LSO wrote to Management Council regarding appropriate inclusions within the budget bill, there were concerns about modifying statute to change revenue flows within the text of the budget, except for limited circumstances. And this specifically provides that in the event of a budget shortfall, you can move money from the LSRA, for example, to the school capital construction account for the period of the budget.
And if we keep that, does it impact everything downstream, all the charts and the, okay?
No, Mr. Chairman. It just provides a safety valve, and you technically you went for decades without it, but that was also prior to the new enhanced adherence to limited activity in the budget bill.
So it's authority to move dollars around freely. It's like a superflex.
Well, and it's not just every dollar, it's only investment income off of the PMTF that would otherwise be deposited in the LSRA. So it's not all money, it is only that subject to subsection S, which is.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, it is, the language does specify, as necessary to alleviate a budget shortfall or structural budget deficit. So the statute does limit, I think, the purposes for those transfers.
So transferring the earnings from the PMTF instead of to the LISRA to other accounts. Okay. It'd be nice to have that language. I suspect we're probably going to keep that S. But well, we're going to vote on it. I do want to see that language for the floor presentation if we've got to take a committee of the whole amendment.
Mr. Chairman, the next item that I just wanted to bring up for practical purposes is on page 37, lines 17 through 20. And as Mr. Fuller indicated, this is one of the sections that is effective immediate. And this is what I call the second tier tip for FMRs and severance taxes, which the Senate, I fully acknowledge, has been opposed to, and they were opposed to this one. Nevertheless, your budget is built on availability of those funds. And in fact, you've spent those funds in House Bill 1 and Senate File 1. So there's a fairly significant conflict, and this is effective immediate. So either you can fund your budget with these revenues, or you can repeal that and change the source of those revenues. But if this bill were to pass committee of the whole, you're going to have a sizable change here on the profile, because you can't spend the dollar twice.
Yeah, these are the royalties. This is the whole thing where we directed some to the schools and some, and it was 2/3 1 year and 2/3 the other way the next year, that sort of thing.
That's correct. And so, for example, a portion of these revenues supported the $100 million amendment for school capital construction.
Right. So can we just delay the effectiveness?
Mr. Chairman, I think you could.
Or Mr. Chairman, I think you could probably leave it alone, given that these two provisions only apply to this fiscal year and fiscal year 24.
I got you. That might be the best. Does that throw you off elsewhere, Don?
Mr. Chairman, no. And technically, you can keep this in. Just keep in mind that on third reading of the budget, you'll probably have some fairly significant, if you still, just hypothetically, if you still wanted to build those schools, for instance, we'd probably use general funds as opposed. do school foundation program reserve funds.
Well, let's think about that one a little bit. I don't want any more complication than we have to in the budgets. We might just leave those in place till they expire naturally. We'll have to think about that one. Okay. And
Mr. Chairman, yes, two more just practical implications, and that is the timing on this bill is different than the timing on Senate File 66 and House Bill 89. They arguably are very similar because this is just a combination of all those, but the timing is different.
And where are you? Are you on the very last effective date?
Correct. And I think this draft, and maybe Brian can correct my characterization, this draft kind of pushes things out the longest to the next biennium, particularly for the total return, as opposed to making it effective with those deposits into those reserve accounts more immediately. Nonetheless, those bills, they all can't pass, right? You have to pick either Senate File 66, House Bill 89, or this one. They all conflict with each other, and they have different effective dates.
So doesn't House Bill 89 have these same provisions about the certification, the back room is in place, and that they can track and report accurately?
Mr. Chairman, I believe it's identical language with a different effective date. So this one is delayed by a year compared to House Bill 89, for example.
I don't know that those preconditions are going to happen in less than a year. It could be. I mean, there's some pretty complicated stuff that has to happen in that back room. It might be a distinction without a difference. But it's good to have the heads up.
And Mr. Chairman, part of the complication with this is, the need to amend language in the same section for different purposes. So really, it's, the PMTF reserve account is probably the best example. Language that, would need to apply at the beginning of the fiscal biennium, also concerns the total return piece. So that's why the entire thing is pushed out to July 1, 24.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, last practical item is the State Treasurer's Office and SLIB is required to certify that they are investing this for purposes of total return, yet some of those accounts cannot be invested in equities. So the Hathaway Reserve Account, for example, or the Excellence in Higher Education Reserve Account, they're statutorily limited on their investment purposes. And the reason for that is, if those were put in here, the bill would require a 2/3 vote for passage, because pursuant to the Constitution, you have to have 2/3 vote to invest in stocks of corporations.
Okay. So Hathaway and Excellence, you can't do equities. So can't we do their total return with the exception of the Hathaway and the Excellence?
And that's what is contemplated here, but I just wanted to
So point that to me. Where we exempt those two, or we give them a walk on the total return.
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe there is an exemption. I think on page 41, and Brian can jump in here, on line 16 and 17, it merely lists the total return investment strategy. I think it's understood that only allowable investments within that.
And Mr. Chairman, it's actually the language right before that. So page 41, lines 15 and 16, it, requires that those transferred amounts, be invested in accordance with law.
In accordance with law.
Correct,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. So the reserve accounts that may be invested in equities can continue to do so. Those that are
Gotcha.
not specifically authorized would not.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just some practical implications. I'll
No,
move
it's greatly appreciated.
quickly to the, I think there are 5 pages of flow charts. The first one is arguably the most aggressive, and starting from the left-hand side, it's titled Senate File 145, State Budgeting and Reserves Flow Chart. And I don't know if your copy is in the large.
Oh, it's the big one.
It's the big one,
Okay,
yes.
gotcha.
Yes. So on
Said
the,
it's aggressive? What was the word you used?
it's the most complete.
Okay, most
and-
complete.
Yes,
Comprehensive. you
comprehensive.
I've got to make sure these things work. Okay,
On the top right-hand corner, you can see the budget reserve account is a recipient of severance taxes, federal mineral royalties, and to the extent they exist, inheritance taxes. Now, just as an aside, Wyoming has a provision that if there is a federal inheritance tax on the books that is shared with the state, we have a state statute that allows for the deposit of
Okay,
those.
my top right corner is
Or
revenue.
top left corner, excuse me.
Okay, all right.
So all of those revenues, rather than being deposited into the budget reserve account, would be deposited into the general fund as the dotted line illustrates.
And if I understand, the budget reserve account was intended at one time to fulfill the role of the LISRA. And now it's just a duplicate checking account to the general fund. So when we look at cash on hand, we look at both the general fund and the BRA, right?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Okay,
The next maybe column of revenue is investment income off of the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund. And rather than being deposited in the SIPA and subsequently the Penitentiary Capital Construction Account or the School Major Maintenance Sub-account within SIPA, all of those you can see are crossed out because the bill deletes or repeals those accounts, and any investment income from the PMTF that would have gone to those boxes follows the red dotted line down to the general fund. Then you can see the LSRA would continue to receive some portion of the PMTF investment income. It would also benefit from the School Foundation Program reserve account, severance taxes. So this is essentially a repeal of the secondary cap on severance taxes. That's Section 3 of the bill. Moving across the page, you can see the federal mineral royalties and co-lease bonuses that would otherwise have gone to the school capital construction account, flow through that, through the bottom of the page to the School Foundation Program. You're repealing the SCCA. And then similarly on the 33% of the state royalty stream, rather than going into the state land mineral royalty account, that is also deposited in the School Foundation Program. The middle portion of the page is perhaps best reflected in the subsequent 4 charts, and these are all of the individual investment
hang on just a
policies.
second. So I see a dotted line in the middle on the very bottom, a dotted line from the LISRA, which dumps into the EHEE. Is that the Excellence in Higher Education? EHEE. There's money directed out of LISRA to that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, these are just the transfers. So you'll recall.
One-time transfer to get the.
5X.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
And you can see how, maybe we won't walk through each of the individual spending policies, but the PMTF is probably your next page. It says FY 2025 estimated spending policy of 94719D, and it is the PMTF severance tax. And you can see at the bottom of the page, the SIPA account, the SIPA transfers to the school major maintenance sub-account, and the penitentiary capital construction account have all been repealed or struck. And those funds would be deposited to the extent they exist in the general fund. You can also see the deposit from the LSRA at the top right of the page being made to the PMTF reserve account of $274.7 million. And what is also no longer here is any dotted line that guarantees the SIPA account or the school major maintenance sub-account. So that is also been removed.
Okay.
And in the middle of the page, you can see the maximum has been increased from 150% of the spending policy to 245%. And as Mr. Fuller indicated, that's 7X.
Gotcha.
Mr. Chairman, much simpler on the common school account because there are no subsequent breaks. So the main difference here is a deposit to get to 5X, and then an increase in the tip threshold to 7X in the middle of the page from 150% of the spending policy to 420%.
Okay.
Similar on the next two pages, I don't know, same concept for
Gotcha.
excellence in higher ed and the Hathaway Student Scholarship Account.
And do you have just in case, I'm not asking you to have him do this, but do you have something like this that looks like what it's all done, a biennium out when the transfers are done and all the red goes away? If not, you did that on another bill, on the budget simplification bill of a couple of years ago. You had the before and after.
We don't have that immediately, but that's possible. We might be able to prepare that.
I don't know how difficult it would, if it's a lot of work, let's not do it, but it'd be
Well,
helpful.
As you indicated, really that page is the before, and the after is much simpler, right?
Yeah.
Because 5 accounts are removed.
Yeah, I mean, that's the benefit of the whole bill, besides putting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into reserves, including the school reserves, is to just make it a much clearer, simpler chart of accounts. Questions for Don and Brian?
No, this is pretty simple.
Thank you. That's staff agency comment.
Good morning. My name is Katie Smith, and I am the Chief Financial Officer for the State Treasurer's Office. I know that there has been a couple concerns about the timing and if the back office would be up and running for this change to the TRR strategy investment. I fully believe that we are ready. We can handle that. It simplifies our process. So anything that makes it easier, we're ready for and eager to do. So I don't feel like trying to go as July 1st, 2023 is going to be burdensome. Our system now, what we're developing, our chart of accounts can handle it much easier than what we had even a year ago. So we're prepared for the consolidation of the pools and moving towards a more streamlined investment portfolio.
Thank you. Don, good to see you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you too. I'm Dawn Williams, Deputy State Treasurer. And we just wanted to assure you, I believe the language was added to the bill originally for that certification from us to SLIB and thereby to the legislature for that certification because of the concern of us being able to manage it in such a short period of time. And as Katie indicated, we are excited about this change and this opportunity to be able to streamline the processes. As you've all been aware, well, most of you have been aware over the interim, we talked about how we're, every time the legislature creates a fund, it creates a new pool for us. And we're letting the pools drive the investment strategy. We'd like to have an investment strategy where all of the funds can actually adhere to the way that we're investing, other way around, basically. So we're excited about it, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
So Don, a question that will come up on the floor is what are we earning on the money now, and what do we anticipate we'll earn when you're able to get to a TRR in percentage, in dollars? I mean, in spitball, I know it's hard, but.
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, I think Patrick Fleming, the Chief Investment Officer, and I can come up with some figures, some estimates of what it's going to look like going into the new TRR strategy.
And then any idea of if we can quantify the administrative impact? I hear, easier, but the floor is going to want to know. I just want to be able to, in any way I can quantify the ease and the administrative impact. I don't know how to do that.
Mr. Chairman, absolutely. I can definitely come up with a summary for you so that you have some key points on what it's going to take for the back office and how it will make our lives easier.
Okay.
You ask, Patrick is our Chief Investment Officer, is loath to predict investment earnings. But what we can tell you is that where the reserve accounts are invested now is within the state agency pool, which generates a 1.5% interest rate, whereas If we were in a total return strategy, we would have an opportunity for those funds to be invested the same way that the corpus accounts are invested, which garner a much higher interest rate.
5 to 6.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And so 1.5, is that pool A? Is it in
Mr. Chairman, no state agency pool.
state
It's
agency? pool?
our cash account.
Okay. Anything else for this agency?
No, Mr.
Members of the committee? Thank you. Any other agency comment? Agency comment. Comment from the public? Boyd, welcome.
Mr. Chairman, Boyd Brown, working with the School Boards Association currently, have been a superintendent in 3 different districts across the state. The only suggestion that I would make is that the committee might look at increasing the cap in the school foundation program with moving all of the capital construction back into the school foundation program.
Which tell me the cap.
So there's a $100 million cap, I believe, on the school foundation program. And after $100 million, that money out of the school foundation program is, I believe it goes into the LISRA, but I'm not an expert on that. But I would just suggest that we increase that cap.
Okay. Thank you. Other public comment? Yeah, I'll close public comments to the committee. Before we do that, Don, can you help us with this $100 million cap on the SFP?
Mr. Chairman, I believe the speaker has an enormous amount of historical information, and that provision has been repealed. It used to be a $100 million cap, and anything in excess of that would go to the PLF holding account. That structure is no longer in statute. And as evidence of that, when you see the profile, you'll see that balance there, ending balance is around $600 million. There is a floor of $100 million, not a cap, but a floor of $100 million. And this bill, as Brian indicated, repeals that floor. So it no longer is backstopped or guaranteed by the LSRA.
Gotcha. All right, thank you, Don. It's to the committee. It's a pleasure.
It's a simple little bill. I'd move it. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Amendments?
Mr.
Senator
Chairman,
Nethercott,
Mr. Chairman, I would move
page 37,
page 37,
line 13.
line 13. I would add that language back in.
Strike the S.
Strike the S.
Second. Discussion?
Strike S?
Strike S.
So
S is the emergency authority in the event of a fiscal emergency for the legislature to grab the earnings of the PMTF and direct it to other funds, which wasn't there for decades, but LSO said, you know, legally you probably ought to have the authority to do it somewhere. That's my understanding of it.
Question?
Question, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, no. Motion carries. Further discussion,
Mr. Chairman,
please.
how do you want to plan on dealing with the conflicting effective dates of the multiple bills pending in the legislature now?
Well, we got to see what passes. So I don't know that we have to deal with it until we see what's on the table, but I do know this is the position of leadership, that if we're going to go to 5X and 7X, let's clean things up. And I don't know that the House bill does that. And so what they may end up with is an amalgam of some kind, if they can find a middle ground. Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in total agreement with the goals of this bill. We've been working for 2 years to try to simplify our accounts. This session we provided a suite of bills that take steps to do that. I do have a concern though. This bill takes, from what I can discern, 3 parts and is like the coup de grace. This finishes the whole show. And my concern is, while I don't disagree with the intent and I don't disagree with the end game, I worry. And my worry is, A, there's a lot in this baby, and I'm afraid of unintended consequences. 2, and I mentioned this before on the last piece, another piece of the puzzle that was brought forth this committee a week ago. I worry about the body having a bit of fatigue over some of these issues and just worrying about, are they going to understand where exactly, how this translates to them? The chart is helpful, but I've been looking at these charts now for a long time,
Right.
and so I get it, and I do have a concern. My question is, and I want to swing and get this done as much as anyone, but I wonder sometimes if we didn't take more time, lay this back, split it into 3 bills, and bring it back and finish the job with the budget next year. Only because to make sure that we get what we wanted to. We see the bills that pass, we see the bills that don't pass, and we work through. I know it's a chicken and egg argument. I understand that. And if we roll with this, but we roll with it. But I just wanted to get that concern out there because, like I say, when we presented those last bills, or when I presented the last one, I could kind of see it in everyone's eyes on the floor. They were starting to get that look.
What was the last bill?
Oh, the last one where we were, I can't remember which one it was, where we were cleaning up more accounts.
Oh, one of ours.
Yeah, one of our.
We get looks when we bring bills, yeah.
When we do, but when we explain, and we've explained all the way through that it's a suite of bills and this is the end game, this is the end result. When I saw this bill drop, I got about 6 calls and I was going, what's 145 doing? And frankly, I had to read it 3 times and call Don to make sure that I understood where it was. I thought I knew where you were headed with it, but I wanted to make sure. And so, like I say, no disagreement here, but you've got to, I'm just kind of going through the last couple of days in my mind.
Right.
We got a 5-page fiscal note here that moves hundreds of millions of dollars all around the board. And so some may pick out one thing, some may see, and I hope they do, if we made a mistake, that they make a catch of it, that we didn't do something wrong or there's some unintended pull here. But I guess, like I say, if it's the will of the committee department, we'll go down there and defend it with vigor, as we say. But I do worry about that and I have a concern. So that's, and I wonder if we wouldn't be, I'd hate to put us in a position where this crashed and then we couldn't resurrect it again. And that worries me. I'd rather err on the side of making sure we did it exactly right.
So Senator Grew, your concern about the complexity is shared by many, including myself. So you let the perfect be the enemy of the good, you do an incremental approach. This is a comprehensive approach that leadership has asked us at least to advance to the floor. Whether it ever comes up to the committee of the whole is an open question. Because I think a lot depends on, I think they're waiting to see what the House does. And it is dramatic, but it's pretty dramatic to take hundreds of millions of dollars and move to a 5X policy too. I mean, that in itself is going to be, we're going to see whether that dog hunts too. But I think your concern about the complexity is shared, and for that reason, I don't know for sure that it'll even come out on the committee. But it certainly describes the vision. I suspect you're right. I suspect this will go on to interim because we've already got 2.5, 3 years into it. But at least we're laying the ideas out there, I think is the objective.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I would sure agree with this being an interim, as huge as it is. and given the body time to absorb it a little more, I think we're going to have trouble on the floor with this. They're going to glaze over when somebody's presenting it.
Yeah, right.
So I think that's a good alternative.
Anyone else? Well, if I don't have 3 votes to move it to the floor, I'm laying it back.
Maybe we should caucus?
Okay? We'll take a 5-minute break. Yeah, further discussion? Further discussion, clerk will call the roll.
Aye.
Senator Nethercutt. Senator Salzar. And Chairman Kinsky.
Aye. Thank you, folks. And thank you, Brian. Thank you, Don. Our next piece of business is public employee retirement plan contributions. We discussed it previously, but the bill had not yet been moved. Is there ground we want to cover again on that question, or did we open it up for public comment last time? Okay. Yeah, let's do it again. I'm going to open it up for agency comment. Mr. Swindell. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Swindell, the Executive Director of the Wyoming Retirement System. I believe I provided, and we had a good discussion last time. We don't need to go over all of that, but for folks that might be tuning in, this is a bill that emanates from Governor Letter 16, which advocated for a 1% contribution increase to the public employee plan in the retirement system. The governor's proposal was to strengthen the finances of the system, and you have all that actuarial analysis. The Joint Appropriations Committee accepted that proposal, asked for some more analysis, and it has come to you in the form of Senate File 0158, which is similar to the governor's proposal in its contributions to the system, except it splits the burden between the employer and the employee 50-50, whereas the governor's proposal was all to the employer. It does raise about almost $19 million per year in contributions to the pension fund, to be split roughly 9.4 for employers, 9.4 for employees. And it does contain an appropriation of approximately $6.1 million to fund the general fund portions for the state of Wyoming employees, colleges, universities, and an allocation to the K through 12 schools. That's the essence of the bill. As I pointed out earlier, it does strengthen the finances of the bill, of the system. The actuaries are still recommending really your contribution increase ought to be about 2% to hit their actuarially determined recommended contribution rate. It does increase earnings of the plan when you look further out. It's the compounded effect. 19 million inserted into the fund today will be double that in 10 years and quadruple that in about 20 years. And so you can think of it 10 years out or 20 years out, almost a stacked bar chart. There's a corpus of 19 million, but you have all the investment earnings from the previous years. That'll be $80 or $90 million when you look that far out. And we do, of course, have liabilities that far out. And then finally, Mr. Chairman, you'd asked me to get the section of the code that establishes the 100% funding goal. That is Wyoming Statute 9-3454. Little Bowleg's I of that section establishes that these funds shall be managed to a goal of 100%. And then Bowleg's 2 establishes the requirements for any proposed benefit increases, including for inflation adjustments, which basically says it's got to stay above 100% after the increase plus an allowance for market fluctuations.
Okay. Anything for Mr. Swindell? I think I asked for a copy of that statute. Was that in my email?
I haven't emailed it to you yet, but it'll be there as soon as I get out of this. It's 9-3454.
9-3-454. Okay. Anything for Mr. Swindell? All right. Thank you, Dave. Any other agency comment? Any public comment? Welcome, Representative Emeritus.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for qualifying that title. I'm Andy Schwartz with an honorific representing the town of Jackson. I'm not opposed to this bill. I just want to make sure you recognize that local governments also pay into this plan, and this will be something that will be added to their costs. And generally, most of the local governments pick up the employee share, so it will be more than you would see in the bill. I think more importantly, the Appropriations Committee is the home committee for the retirement system. And I would strongly urge you to consider an interim topic to review the totality of how contributions, investment returns, and what the path to 100% funding looks like. When I was working on Fire A, Mr. Swindell gave me basically a spreadsheet where I could keep punching in different numbers and it would automatically show what the consequence of changing aspects of the retirement system funding and payouts are. And I think it would be beneficial to the joint committee to have a meeting with the actuaries to get a better understanding of how the whole retirement plan works, the multiple retirement plans. I'm going to stand for any questions.
Questions for Representative Emeritus? No, I will say this, with regard to the interim, I think there's sufficient interest on the part of the committee that when we're asked to submit our suggested interim topics, I'm pretty sure this will be on that list. And it's up
Thank you,
to,
Mr.
it's up to
Chairman.
management council and what they do with it, but as you know. So, and I think you're aware, years ago when I first became mayor, there was nothing on our books to indicate we had any kind of pension issue. And then the GASB standard kicked in after great delays, and now the city of Sheridan has a fairly large number on its books reflecting an accrued but unfunded liability. And so one way or another, we got to pay. But it's a very modest step. But I think your comment on the interim is a good one. And thanks for being here. Further comment from the public?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
there are a number of individuals in the room that represent institutions that have employees that would be affected by this bill draft. I'm surprised that no one's coming forward with further comment. I appreciate the watchful eyes and ears about what we're doing, but we really do need your feedback.
And I'll weigh in and say, I already hit a buzzsaw trying to do the right thing on this pension a couple of years ago. I mean, speak now before we get out on the floor, because I'd rather hear it now. I appreciate it. Boyd, welcome.
Chairman Kinski and members of the board, Boyd Brown, representing Wyoming School Boards Association. Just a couple things to think about as you're moving forward with this. Understand the need to keep increasing the retirement fund and keeping it very solvent, especially if we're looking at trying to do some COLAs as we move forward. Just a reminder that we've just gone through the largest amount of increase in escalation in prices out there. We're not looking at getting an external cost adjustment for school foundation, and that it would be, we'll have to take that money from somewhere to be able to pay for the amount that we're going to have to increase for the retirement account. So just to take that into consideration as you're moving forward with it. With that, I'd answer questions.
Questions for the speaker, Mr. Boyd? Hearing no questions, thank you. Thank you for your, any others?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I am Sandy Caldwell, Executive Director of the Wyoming Community College Commission. And of course, a person you all know very well is our CFO, Mr. Michael Swank. We will take this opportunity. Thank you, Senator Nethercott, for voicing that we should have the opportunity to speak, so we will. Our largest concern with this bill was whether or not it included not only the state retirement, the WRS, but it also included the TIAA CRA that the community colleges and frankly, the university, their employees are eligible for. Our understanding is that it does. And the other thing that we always think about is whether or not this is 100% of the employer share. And we understand that it is not based on Michael's calculation. This is something that we are always watching, particularly since the community colleges do rely on part of their local revenue, which does experience a great deal of volatility. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions. And if you get too deep, I will have to rely on Mr. Swank.
Questions for Dr. Caldwell? Questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator.
I'm pretty sure I'll look for a head nod here, but I think it does. And I think on page 8, line 1 is where that's pointed out. If I look around here, is used in this section, state agency includes each state executive, legislative, judicial department, board, commission, or other agency instrumentality of the state for purposes of this section. Does that include community colleges?
Keep reading, it does, yes.
Yes, for the purpose of section. Yeah, University of Wyoming Community College. Yeah, no, I forgot that last one. Yeah, so it does.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Senator Greer, yes, we knew it included the community colleges. We wanted to make sure that it included the option that their employees have for TIAA-CREF, and it does. And for us, we're always looking to see if it is all of that employee contribution, similar to what agencies would receive, or if it is a reduced amount, and it is a reduced amount.
Other questions? Ms. Schwenk?
Mr. Chairman, Michael Swank, CFO for the Wyoming Community College Commission. Dr. Caldwell, I think, covered pretty much all that we have to say at this point. We're watching this patiently. I've been personally involved with this type of legislation for about 15, 16 years, but I appreciate your consideration.
Questions? Questions? Hearing none. Thank you for your input. Thank you. Any other public comments?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Mike Smith, University of Wyoming. I don't really have a lot to add, I guess, but I don't want to ignore the invitation from Senator Nethercott. I would parrot what the town of Jackson and the colleges mentioned. Anytime you take a similar step, it puts a further burden on our budget process to meet our employer portion of the contribution. And you know, it becomes the equivalent of an unfunded mandate of sorts on our budget at the university. There's not any additional money. If there were additional money in the block grant to cover these costs, then when reductions take place down the road, you know, that money comes out with those reductions. So it is something we're watching closely. Just want to make you aware, as you already are, of that additional burden. And on the employee side as well, it's a small percentage, but it does counteract a little bit the generous steps you've taken to increase state employee compensation as well. So with that, I would stand for questions. Whether I can answer them is a different
Any
story.
questions for Mr. Smith? Any questions? Hearing none, thank you, Mr. Smith, for your Senator Hicks.
Today, based on the request, not as Senator Hicks, but as both a pensioner, future pensioner, participant in this program, and also the administrator for a local government entity that participates in this program. And I welcome the opportunity to move this plan to a position sometime out in the future where we may actually be able to discuss a COLA. Right now at 76% actuarially sound, that's not even in the foreseeable future. And so as somebody in the other capacity that represents a number of government employees, given that it's the single largest employment sector in Carbon County, I continually get requests from pensioners as to when do we get a COLA, and as I explained to them, probably not in your lifetime. Because the plan sitting at somewhere in the mid-70s actuarially sound just won't stand the ability of COLA. So sometime out in the future, Mr. Chairman, I hope we have that opportunity as we move closer to 100% actuarially soundness that we could grant that. But as a pensioner, potential future pensioner, and also as a local government administrator, this is a very important component for our ability to hire and retain people. And I think I can safely say that it's a good tool, and the more actuarially sound the program is, the more security we have in future retirements. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for Citizen Hicks?
Actually, I have one.
We have a question.
I have a question.
Citizen Hicks, we have a question.
Question.
Mr. Pensioner,
Aspiring.
Hopefully, I lived that long.
Hopefully not soon, and you collect many dollars. But I do have a question. you laid out the case very succinctly, and I agree with what you said, but I do have one question. Between the governor's recommendation of a 1% versus what we've been talking about as a 50-50, given what you just said about what you tell your fellow pensioners, present or future, about not getting a COLA, what we know about inflation, what we know, everything that we know right now, and a little bit of sprinkle that pixie dust around of all the things we don't know about how the pay plan is going to come out, what would you advise us to do? A point, a half and half, or hold and wait?
Mr. Vice Chairman, Senator Drew, I think it's always important that people understand their retirement plans and have skin in the game. And I think it's fair to ask of the employee, because even that employee's contribution, it's their money. It goes to their plan. They will recoup that money when they retire. In the meantime, as we know under the plan, 70% is investment returns, 30% is contributions. The more that both contribute, both the employer and the employer, increases the potential returns on those to again move that plan more quickly towards an actuarial assignment. So I support, and I think it's a good thing to have. It's their money. It's just a deferral, and the state's matching it. So it's an investment in the future of not only their retirement, but I think all the pensioners. And so I think it's a good idea.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted the good soon-to-be pensioner to know that I was looking for allies, not gotchas on that question. Thank you.
Other question for Citizen Hicks. Thank you, Citizen Hicks. All right, any other public comment? If not, we'll close. Is there anybody on the Zoom?
No, sir.
Nobody in Zoom and nobody in the room. We'll close public comment.
Move the bill.
Move the bill. Move the second. Any discussion from the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I would like a brief memo from staff, either drawing on the governor's data on his pay plan or LSO. I've heard a lot of numbers. Phase 1, I don't know whether it's 6 or 7%. Phase 2, I don't know whether it's 6 or 7. What gives this impetus is, well, we're in the middle of the pay hike, 0.5%. We're hoping won't be missed quite as much, but for the pay hike. And that's the only reason that I'm daring to go out and catch the spear again.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ross.
Let's just start over.
Heather God.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yeah, I share that hope that the body in both chambers will support those increases. I have my concerns that those employee compensation increases will be challenged, arguably successfully. And so this would cause a true burden in the event it went forward right now without that as a nexus to it. But I also am realistic that the gap between is only going to increase with time. And so it's just a matter of delaying the inevitable with potentially greater harm. I believe that's likely true. I do wish there was a little bit more opportunity for this to have been vetted in the interim. I would like to have heard from cities and towns and colleges and universities and everybody to say this will cost us this amount, but clearly no one has any idea what that amount would be and their impact on their employees about that because of the timing of this bill. So we just heard it really officially earlier this week. It's now been officially numbered for our review. Not a new conversation for any of the entities, certainly, but the swiftness of which we may move this forward is, and so certainly causes some caution. I hesitantly agree to move, am in support of the bill, but I'm concerned about greater ramifications.
Other comments from the committee?
No.
Other comments?
Mr. Vice Chair, regarding the interim, Senator Grew and I have the longevity on this committee. We've been studying this, I think, going back to Senator Bebout as chairman. But I appreciate that you guys haven't had the pleasure of going through this process, and I certainly think it's worth exploring again, because not only is it a level of awareness on the legislature's part that needs to be raised, but on the part of the employee. A lot of people out there don't realize the jeopardy the pension may be. And that's where I think the awareness needs to be raised the most.
Mr. Chairman Singh, can I ask a quick question?
Just a minute.
I would say if the second phase of the pay plan doesn't go through, I hope it does. If it doesn't go through, I'm not on board with this.
Why did the joint interim or even Senator Probst not adopt this bill prior to now?
Anybody have an answer for that?
As I recall, it's not ever lost upon us at KAC that there are some who say that we sponsor too many bills, and that we look at this, and we had the suite of bills that we felt raised to the top of the list were the budget bills, and trying to work through that. And we did not get to this in fully developed concept form. So in time with our meeting schedule, I think that was, am I missing something? I think that was.
Well, Mr. Vice Chair, I would say also, partly it's me and partly some others, I'm still a little tender from the last time we tried to fix this. And so there was hesitance, and then I think when we saw the second phase of the pay plan, and then saw that we were going to go with the governor's recommendation to do the whole 9 yards, I think there was a move by at least a number of people to say, well, let's go ahead and run the bill out there. And they gave it as a Senate file.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Guru.
And I share the concerns about what we don't know. And if I thought that a conceptual amendment that said if the legislation or if the budget pieces of the budget that regarding the pay plan didn't pass, that this would go to 1% all on the employer, I would do it. My fear is, of course, that one would drive the answer to the other when we got it to the floor. They'd look at the cost of this and say, well, okay, I'll say yes to your 1%, and I'll say no to the pay. So I think we might be setting ourselves up. That's where I kind of fall with the interim piece, to say let's wait until it falls out. But I also understand waiting costs money. The time value of money. Your argument has prevailed upon me. So that's kind of where I'm at on this.
Thank you. Thank you, committee. Sensing you're ready to vote, let's do roll call on Senate File 158, please.
Senator Anderson.
Aye.
Senator Guru.
Aye.
Senator Nethercott. Senator Salzar.
No.
And Chairman Kinski.
Aye.
Senate File 158 has passed the Senate Appropriations Committee.
I'll carry it on the floor.
Okay.
Okay. Can I take a moment?
Yes.
The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 146, State-Funded Capital Construction. And this is a simple little bill. It is a simple little bill that arose out of the information that we received during, I think, CapCon. And it was the State Construction Department, in light of inflation, is putting this fairly interesting clause into the contracts for inflation escalation and de-escalation. Oh, Catherine, staff, please. Catherine, come.
Good morning, Catherine Camerati, LSL. Okay. This is Senate File number 146, State-Funded Capital Construction. This act creates the Wyoming State Hospital Demolition Account, provides appropriations for state-funded capital construction projects, inclusive of inflation provisions, grants, providing matching funds, authorizing expenditure of prior appropriations, reversion of funds, creating the Riverton State Building Task Force, purchase of land for future construction. And please correct me on my pacing or depth. I think a good place would be to start at page 8,
Okay,
if you agree.
first should be last and last should be first. Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, we're going to start on line 10. We included the SCD Riverton State Office Building for 34 million general fund.
Move the mic a little bit closer, Catherine.
Yes,
Thank
we included 34 million for the Riverton State Office Building on line 12. We reduced the state hospital demo to 15 million. And I will note, Mr. Chairman, that the budget bill is capturing this reversion, but CapCon is appropriating the 15 million. Moving on, we added DFS Emerson Building, the rehab for 500,000. And this would be footnote number 4. It's for the rehabilitation and renovation of the Emerson Building on the campus of Wyoming Life Resource Center. And we also moved on line 19, Osley. It was State Parks and Cultural, but we moved it to Osley. And we also, on line 19, removed the 8-way split. So it's just the 25,000 during JAC.
Okay. What, go back, Catherine, you said on the 15 million something and then it was recaptured in the budget
Yes,
bill?
Mr. Chairman. So on line 12 for the state hospital demolition, we reduced this 15 million from 39.3 million. And what is happening is the budget bill is capturing that 39 million reversion, and the CapCon bill is appropriating 15 million
Okay, I got you.
of other funds.
Yeah. And if you know, why is it necessary to create a old hospital demolition account? It seems to me we create just about an account for everything. What, you know why that's necessary to do? Or is it necessary to do?
Mr. Chairman, I am not sure why we would need to create a capital construction account. Perhaps Mr. Richards would have a better explanation.
Mr. Chairman, I believe it was the intention of the mover of that amendment to follow the practice that was used in the state building in Casper, the wildlife or the Wyoming Life Resource Center, Wyoming State Hospital, and this facility here. They were all used to capture money over a period of years in order to pay for a project at some point in the future. So this is capturing reversions just within the Department of Health for a period of time, recognizing that there is an ongoing need for those demolition services that will not be addressed in 1 year or even one biennium.
But strictly speaking, it's not necessary to have it. I mean, just as each year budget cycle comes up, we just look at the project and see how much we need to appropriate for this phase.
Mr. Chairman, that's absolutely correct. You could fund it that way.
Okay. Senator Groove? Catherine?
Question, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. Lines 15, 16, 17, power line tech, construction tech for EWC and Northwest College Orndorff building. Just what, oh, I'm page 8, I'm sorry.
Oh, page 8. Okay.
Page 8, lines, I apologize. Lines 15, 16, and 17. Just give me just a couple of words on each one of those projects.
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Guru, so these are for the Powerline Technology Center, I believe, and we also have Michael Swank here as well if he wants to chime in, but this is for the Western Wyoming Community College Power Tech and the Eastern Wyoming.
They're gonna come up and tell me. Is it okay?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Caldwell will add color commentary.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Guru, the community college projects that we have here, I believe you were referencing specifically line 17 on page 8. That is the Northwest College Orendorff building. Is that what you were asking me?
Well, actually, Mr. Chairman.
15, 16, and 17.
Yeah, 15, 16, and 17. I got the others, but those three I was just a little weak on what they were exactly.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Senator Guru, I can step through these projects. I think it sounds like you're familiar with the Laramie County Community College exterior facade. The Western Wyoming Community College is the power line technology facility. We have one of the new programs we're very proud of at Western. And this is one of the projects that they brought forward in our very robust capital prioritization process. So this one was prioritized, and it is seeking the 50% funding for the project plus the amount that's allowed on state construction department for their contingency funding. The second one that you referenced is the EWC Construction Tech Facility. That is at the Douglas campus, and it is part of their expansion and build out of that. It is on their master plan. And at this time, the college has to seek, of course, anything that is over 1.5 million must come to the legislature for approval, even if it is not requesting funding, because they qualify for major maintenance. Eastern Wyoming College is not seeking funding for this project. They are seeking authorization for them to proceed with this project. And then the next one, putting my glasses back on, Mr. Chairman, is the Northwest College Orendorff building. That one is a capital renewal. And we went through quite a process for the newer members on capital renewal projects. It is in a statute. We had to go through a process to actually develop a definition, which we did in consultation with the state construction department. This is I believe, our second or third project that is what is called a capital renewal. And it is, what is happening is a failure of the facility that is beyond major maintenance. They have used major maintenance up to the point of this where now they need a comprehensive approach, and they do have the level 2 plan, Mr. Chairman, Senator Grube, the level 2 plan completed for that, which they did in consultation with state construction. Capital renewal projects come forward for 100% funding. And then that's it. That's not my project, the next one.
Let me just follow up.
Please, yeah.
And just again to make sure, so line 16, the construction tech building, all in Douglas, that's all other funds and just looking for authorization. So there's no new funds from any source other than your own.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Guru, you are correct. EWC is not seeking a funding request for this project, only authorization to proceed.
And then if I can do one more
Please,
follow-up
yeah.
on the power line tech, that's with 1.791 of other funds. So this is just a partial on this. So that's your fund.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Guru, I did not hear the last part of your question.
So no, just saying, so we do have other fund components already there on that one.
Mr. Chairman, so on the power line technology, that one came forward to us for the 50% funding. And then, so 50% private revenue, 50% state funds plus the contingency, which is why you see the differential that is allowed for state construction department.
Thank you.
Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So can I go to the fiscal note? So tell me if I'm wrong, the total appropriation for this is it 237 million? Can you give me what the total cost is?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Salazar, are you referencing the 15, 16, 17, or the entire?
The entire.
So the entire appropriation of all projects, even in the sections,
Correct.
would be 238,526,662.
Thank you.
238-526-6602.
662.
Okay, now I've got a question. What am I missing? Because it's 202 at the top. Where's the extra money coming from?
So
Mr. Chairman, the 202 is general funds. You have 19.8 million in what we refer to as private funds. That often comes in the source of local revenue for community colleges or the university. And then $1 million of SIPA, and that was for the Ranch A appropriation. You also have $15 million of what we refer to as other funds, which is the reversion fund for the hospital demolition.
Another comment.
And Mr. Chairman, just for kind of a clarification or recap, on the private funds or local revenue funds, is that where entities are seeking permission to appropriate those funds, but we're not actually giving them money to put it?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, that is correct. And it is a little bit odd, but the policy purpose behind that is once these facilities are constructed, the state is responsible for major maintenance. So this is an opportunity to regulate the amount of future liability the state will bear.
And then, Mr. Chairman, follow up?
Please.
The $15 million for the demolition account to the state hospital, that is reversionary funds, correct? Those are funds left over and they're being repurposed?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. It's not a new appropriation, and so you arguably are not adding money to the profile. You are not. On the other hand, on June 30th, 2024, absent this provision, those monies would be deposited in the general fund and available for expenditure in the 25-26 biennium.
Don, I don't see any reference to that in the footnote 3, which is applicable to the state hospital demo.
Mr. Chairman, I believe Ms. Camerati indicated that the reversionary language is actually in footnote 13 in the budget bill, and then the expenditure of those funds is found here in the capital construction bill. I might bring to your attention, recall you adopted the budget bill before you modified the CapCon bill. So now they are different. So there's 39 in the budget bill, 15 in this bill. So if you wanted to align those one way or the other, you might consider an amendment to the budget to reduce the 39 to 15 if you so desired.
We're not double, if they're each 15, we're not appropriating 30. Okay. Mike, Senator Grew.
One last question. On the, maybe two, but we'll take them one at a time. On line 5 on page 8, the state facility inflation reserve, $51,405,000. I look down to footnote number 1, and I see $26,639 on line 31. That's appropriated for inflationary costs associated with previously approved and authorized projects for community colleges. Then above that, on line 26, $26,765,833 is appropriated for inflationary costs associated with previously appropriated and authorized project for state facilities managed by the construction department. I guess that's, when I look at the projects beyond the community college projects, it doesn't amount to that much money. So it must be projects that we have previously approved. Correct?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, that is correct. So none of the $51 million is for projects on lines 6 through 20. All of the 51 is for prior years. It's projects that are underway. Many of them have been bid out. Some of them are in partial completion. But none of the 51 million applies to these projects.
Thank you. If I can
Good
follow up.
clarification, yeah.
Now, if I can follow up then. I'm trying to hone in on this 200 million number. So then if you go to page 10, line 5, inflation reserve UW, $70 million. Once again, that is to cover the cost of inflation with regards to one project that was previously approved, and that's the dorm project. And that's specified Is that called out on line one? Yeah,
Lines
student,
15,
yep,
16, and 17.
student housing project. So that's the total of where that money goes. So if, whoop,
Shall first.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. So hypothetically, I think they expect to expend $70 million, but maybe it's only 65. If there is $5 million left over, then that $5 million could be allocated to previously approved projects. For example, the Corbett Pool, the law school, West Stands, et cetera.
well, that would be.
Only if the dormitories are completed within the approved budget.
Okay. Just want to make sure. All right, thank you.
So another cut, I noticed your light was still on. I'm sorry, I didn't call on you.
No, you're okay. Very helpful. Senators, going back to where Senator Guru was on page 8, line 31. Senator Guru identified inflationary costs in this footnote associated with the inflation reserve for capital construction projects. If we go back to page 3, keep that in mind. Page 3, line 9. We call it a material cost escalation factor instead of, which is different than inflationary costs. And so there is conflict between the text and the footnote.
Senator Nethercott, I think this section 9-2-3006 is prospective. I think this is for contracts going forward.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. So 92306G is what the provision we refer to as the escalator de-escalator, and that relates to page 8, lines 6 and 7. So that is for the inflationary costs for existing projects, and it is prospective. The inflation reserve relates to H, 9-3006H, which appears at the top of page 4, which is limited to inflationary related costs as opposed to the material cost escalation, de-escalation, which you referred to.
Thank you.
Anything else? Yes, okay. Catherine, is this the best committee you've appeared in front of so far?
Mr. Chairman, this is the first committee I've appeared before. So yes.
So best is what I was giving you a softball there. Yeah, I said best so far. Okay, anything else for Catherine?
I would like to note a few things, and that would be on page 10 for line 5. We did remove footnote, the JAC removed footnote number 1C, the condition of further legislative action before expending funds. And I would also like to note, Mr. Chairman, line 6, for the AMK Ranch, they removed that no state funds shall be appropriated or expended on this project. The JAC removed that language.
What was the other line? That was,
Mr. Chairman, the removal of no state funds shall be appropriated or expended on the AMK Ranch.
yeah, which page? And
That is page number 10,
okay, page
line
10.
number 6.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. We had talked about an amendment with Elizabeth, but we don't have that. We talked about a committee amendment.
Should we do that at noon?
Yeah, I think so. I'll find out where we are on that. Okay, we've got to get to the floor. Catherine, thank you. Not as bad as you thought we were going to be, right?
Thank you.
Okay, we'll finish CapCon at noon, and we've got to get up to the floor, so the meeting's adjourned.